Everyone said she failed, until her sister's CEO called her boss in front of her whole family. The doorbell chimed through the house like a death knell, and Melissa Chun felt her stomach clench. She pressed her back against the kitchen counter, watching through the archway as her mother rushed to answer it, her silk blouse pristine and her smile already gleaming. "Sarah, oh, honey, you look absolutely radiant." More voices, more laughter, more people streaming into the living room where balloons spelled out "Congratulations" in metallic gold letters that caught the afternoon light like accusations. Melissa smoothed down her oversized cardigan, the one with the small hole near the left elbow that she kept meaning to fix, and tried to make herself smaller. The kitchen felt like a bunker, safe and separate from the celebration happening just 20 feet away. She could see everything from here: her father adjusting his tie, her cousin Janet already taking selfies, her Aunt Linda holding court near the mantelpiece with a wine glass that somehow never seemed to empty. And at the center of it all, like a sun everyone orbited around, stood her younger sister Emma. Emma, with her perfectly blown-out hair and her designer dress that probably cost more than Melissa's rent. Emma, who had just landed the senior marketing director position at Morrison and Associates, one of the city's most prestigious firms. Emma, who had never failed at anything in her entire 28 years of charmed existence. "Tell us about the salary again," Aunt Linda was saying, her voice carrying that particular tone of vicarious pride that made Melissa's chest tighten. "I still can't believe my niece is making six figures." Emma laughed, the sound musical and confident. "It's not about the money, Aunt Linda. It's about the impact. The campaigns we're launching next quarter are going to change how people think about sustainable living." Melissa turned back to the sink, focusing on the stack of plates that needed washing. Her hands moved mechanically, scrubbing at spots that weren't there, while conversations swirled around her like weather she couldn't control. "She's always been the ambitious one," her mother was saying. Even in high school, Emma knew exactly what she wanted. "Not like some people," her father added, and Melissa didn't need to look to know he was glancing toward the kitchen. "Some people take the scenic route." The scenic route. That's what he called it now, as if dropping out of college to care for Aunt Margaret had been a lifestyle choice rather than a necessity. As if the last 8 years of her life had been some kind of extended vacation rather than a series of increasingly desperate attempts to keep her head above water. "Melissa, honey, can you bring out the shrimp ring?" her mother called. "And maybe arrange it nicely? You know how you are with presentation." She knew how she was with presentation. Terrible, according to her family. The one who couldn't keep a plan alive, let alone a proper social media presence. The one who wore the same 3 sweaters in rotation and whose idea of meal prep was buying groceries with good intentions that usually ended in takeout by Wednesday. Melissa lifted the shrimp ring from the refrigerator, its plastic dome foggy with condensation. Through the clear sides, she could see the pink crescents arranged in perfect circles around a bowl of cocktail sauce. Someone else's idea of elegant. Someone else's definition of trying hard enough. She carried it to the living room, weaving between clusters of relatives who barely acknowledged her presence. The conversation never paused, never shifted to include her. She might as well have been hired help, invisible until needed. "Oh, Melissa," Emma said, noticing her for the first time since arriving. "You look comfortable." It wasn't quite an insult, but it wasn't quite a compliment either. Emma had perfected that particular tone years ago, the one that managed to sound supportive while somehow making Melissa feel like she'd shown up to a wedding in pajamas. "Thanks," Melissa murmured, setting the shrimp ring on the coffee table between a cheese board and a bottle of champagne she couldn't afford to contribute to. "Are you still doing that computer thing?" Cousin Janet asked, looking up from her phone. "The coding, or whatever?" "The computer thing." 8 years of teaching herself programming languages, of building websites for local businesses, of staying up until 3 in the morning debugging code that no one would ever see or appreciate. The computer thing that paid her bills and kept her afloat while everyone else dismissed it as a hobby. "I do web development," Melissa said quietly, "and some back-end systems work." "That's nice," Janet said, already looking back at her phone. "I could never sit at a computer all day. I'd go crazy." "It's not for everyone," her father agreed. "Some people need more human interaction." Human interaction, like the kind she'd had with Mrs. Patterson when she'd built her bakery's entire online ordering system, or with the Rodriguez family when she'd created their food truck's mobile app, or with the dozen other small business owners who trusted her with their digital presence when no one else would give them the time of day. But none of that counted, apparently. None of that was real work. Emma was talking about her new corner office now, about the view of the harbor and the coffee machine that made drinks with names Melissa couldn't pronounce. The family hung on every word, asking questions about her responsibilities, her team, her 5-year plan. Melissa retreated to the kitchen again, this time to check on the roast. The oven's warm glow felt more welcoming than the living room's bright chatter. She pulled out her phone, scrolling through her messages more out of habit than hope. A few client emails, a notification from her bank about a successful payment, a reminder about her dentist appointment next week. Nothing that would change her life. Nothing that would make her family look at her differently. She was about to put the phone away when a new message appeared at the top of her screen. The sender made her pause. Victoria Knight at MorrisonAssociates.com. Victoria Knight, Emma's CEO. The woman Emma talked about in hushed, reverent tones, like she was discussing a celebrity or a force of nature. What could she possibly want with Melissa? Her finger hovered over the message, heart suddenly racing. Maybe it was a mistake. Maybe Victoria had meant to send it to Emma and mixed up their contacts somehow. Maybe. Melissa, her mother's voice cut through her spiraling thoughts. The timer's going off. She shoved the phone back in her pocket, the message unread, and pulled the roast from the oven. The meat was perfect, golden brown and crackling, the kind of cooking that took patience and attention to detail. The kind of skill that went unnoticed because it was expected rather than celebrated. By the time she'd carved the roast and arranged it on the serving platter, the phone in her pocket felt like it was burning a hole through the fabric. But the living room was calling for her again, and there were sides to serve and wine glasses to refill and a dozen small tasks that kept her moving, kept her useful, kept her from having to sit still long enough to think about the message waiting for her. "This is absolutely delicious," Aunt Linda said, taking a bite of the roast. "You've outdone yourself, Patricia." Melissa's mother beamed, accepting the compliment for food she hadn't cooked. "I try to make these occasions special." "Who made this?" Emma asked, cutting into her portion with surgical precision. "Your sister," their father said, gesturing vaguely toward the kitchen. "She's been working on it all morning." "It's really good, Mel," Emma said, and for a moment, her voice was softer, more genuine. "You should cook more often. You should cook more often." As if she didn't cook every day. As if her kitchen wasn't the one room in her small apartment that felt like home. As if the hours she spent perfecting recipes and techniques were just another hobby that didn't quite count as a real skill. The conversation moved on, as it always did, to Emma's achievements and Emma's plans and Emma's bright, shining future. Melissa finished her plate in silence, letting the familiar words wash over her like background noise. The phone in Melissa's pocket felt like it was vibrating through her bones, even though it had only chimed once. She excused herself from the living room chatter about Emma's corner office and slipped into the hallway bathroom, the only place in the house where she could breathe without someone asking her to refill something or clean something up. Her hands shook as she pulled out her phone. The message from Victoria Knight was still there, waiting like a ticking bomb in her inbox. Melissa stared at the screen until the words blurred. Zenith Project? She'd never heard of any Zenith Project. Victoria Knight had to have the wrong person. There was no way Emma's CEO wanted anything to do with her, the family disappointment who worked from her tiny apartment in discount sweaters. But then she remembered something that made her stomach drop. 3 months ago, she'd gotten a contract through one of those freelance platforms. The client had been anonymous, paying through a corporate account for a complete e-commerce overhaul. The project was massive, integrating inventory systems, building custom payment processing, creating a mobile app that could handle thousands of concurrent users. She'd worked 18-hour days for 2 months straight, surviving on coffee and the thrill of building something truly sophisticated. The pay had been incredible, enough to cover her rent for 6 months and finally get her car fixed. The client had been professional but distant, communicating only through project management software. She'd never known who she was really working for. Could it have been Morrison and Associates? Could Zenith have been a code name? A sharp knock on the bathroom door made her jump. "Melissa? Are you okay in there?" Emma's voice carried that familiar note of impatience. "Just a minute," Melissa called back, shoving the phone into her pocket. Her hands were still trembling as she turned on the faucet, splashing cold water on her face. In the mirror, She looked exactly like what she was, a 32-year-old woman who'd never quite figured out how to be the person everyone expected her to be. When she opened the door, Emma was standing there with her arms crossed, designer dress immaculate despite 2 hours of family celebration. "Mom's looking for you. The cake needs to be cut, and you know how she gets about the presentation." Of course, the cake that Melissa had baked at 5 this morning, carefully layering vanilla sponge with fresh strawberries and cream cheese frosting. The cake that would be photographed and posted to social media with captions about family celebrations and "so blessed," with no mention of who had spent hours making it perfect. "I'll be right there," Melissa said. Emma paused, studying her older sister's face. For a moment, something flickered in her expression. Concern, maybe, or recognition of something she'd been too busy to notice before. "You look different," Emma said. "Are you sure you're okay?" Melissa managed a smile. "Just tired. You know how these family things are." Emma's laugh was brittle. "Tell me about it. I love everyone, but sometimes I feel like I'm performing in a one-woman show." She paused, then added more quietly, "Do you ever feel like that? Like you're not really here?" It was the most honest thing Emma had said to her in years, and for a second, Melissa wanted to tell her everything. About the loneliness of working alone, about the clients who treated her like a vending machine for code, about the message in her pocket that might change everything or mean absolutely nothing. But then their mother's voice cut through the moment like a blade. "Girls, where are you? People are waiting." Emma's mask slipped back into place, the moment of vulnerability gone. "Come on, let's get this over with." The cake cutting was a production, as everything in the Chun family tended to be. Melissa stood in the background, watching her mother arrange everyone for photos while Emma posed with the cake knife, looking like she was about to sign a peace treaty. "Speech, speech," Cousin Janet called out, wine glass raised high. Emma laughed, the sound carrying easily through the room. She had always been comfortable being the center of attention ever since they were children. While Melissa had hidden behind their mother's skirts at parties, Emma had been the one to climb onto coffee tables and sing songs for the assembled relatives. "Okay, okay," Emma said, raising her own glass. "I just want to say how grateful I am for all of you being here today. This promotion, it's everything I've worked for since college. Morrison and Associates isn't just a job. It's a chance to make a real difference in the world." Polite applause rippled through the room. Melissa found herself clapping too, out of habit more than enthusiasm. "And I have to give credit where credit's due," Emma continued, her voice taking on that professional tone she used for presentations. "This promotion came with a major project, a partnership that's going to revolutionize how we handle digital integration. We're working with this incredible startup that's completely transformed our capabilities." Melissa's hands stopped clapping. A cold sensation spread through her chest. "The founder of this company is just brilliant," Emma went on, clearly enjoying the attention. "They built something from nothing, created systems that none of our in-house developers could even dream of. Victoria Knight, that's my CEO, she's been raving about this partnership for weeks. Says it's going to put Morrison and Associates on the map as a tech innovator." The room was hanging on every word, but Melissa felt like she was underwater, sounds muffled and distant. Her phone felt heavy in her pocket. "What's the company called?" Aunt Linda asked. Emma paused, her smile faltering slightly. "You know, that's the funny thing. It's this very secretive startup. They work under different project names for security reasons. The founder is apparently very private. Victoria's only met them virtually. But the work speaks for itself." Melissa's vision started to tunnel. 3 months ago, anonymous client, corporate account, project management software with no video calls, no phone meetings, just messages and deliverables and payments that had seemed too good to be true. She'd signed all the contracts under her business name, MC Digital Solutions, a name she'd registered years ago when she'd still believed she might actually build something that mattered, before life had taught her to keep her dreams small and her expectations smaller. "Actually," Emma continued, warming to her topic, "Victoria's coming by tonight. She wanted to meet you all, especially since I've told her so much about the family. She's probably going to talk about the partnership. She can't help herself when it comes to business." The words hit Melissa like physical blows. Victoria Knight was coming here. Tonight. To this house where Melissa was the family disappointment. The one who'd taken the scenic route, the one who did that computer thing that nobody understood or respected. And Victoria Knight thought she was meeting the mysterious startup founder for the first time. Melissa's hands went numb. She needed air. She needed to think. She needed to. Melissa, honey, are you cutting the cake or not? Her mother asked, voice sharp with the particular brand of embarrassment that came when family members didn't perform their assigned roles properly. Everyone was looking at her. Emma, still holding the cake knife with her media-ready smile. Their parents, expectant and slightly annoyed. The cousins and aunts and uncles who'd barely acknowledged her existence for the past 2 hours, but now needed her to make the celebration complete. Sorry, Melissa mumbled, stepping forward to take the knife. Her hands were shaking so badly, she almost dropped it. Are you feeling all right? Emma asked quietly, leaning closer. You look like you've seen a ghost. A ghost? That's exactly what she felt like. A ghost of the person she could have been, haunting a life that had never quite fit right. She managed to cut the first slice, the blade sliding through layers of cake she'd crafted with the same precision she brought to her code. Golden sponge and white frosting and bright red strawberries that had taken her an hour to arrange perfectly. Beautiful work, as always, her father said, but his tone was absent, already moving on to the next part of the evening's entertainment. As always, as if her careful attention to detail was just another expected service, like turning on the lights or breathing. Melissa served slice after slice, watching people take photos of the cake before eating it, listening to compliments that felt like they were meant for someone else. The whole time, her phone felt like it was burning through her pocket, Victoria Knight's message a secret that grew heavier with every passing minute. When the cake was gone and the plates were stacked and the conversation had moved on to other topics, Melissa finally allowed herself to really think about what was happening. If she was right, if MC Digital Solutions was the startup Emma had been talking about, if the Zenith project was her work, then everything was about to change. Victoria Knight would walk into this house expecting to meet some mysterious tech genius, and instead, she'd find the woman serving cake in the kitchen. The woman everyone assumed had failed. By 7 o'clock, the party had settled into that familiar rhythm of family gatherings. The older relatives claiming the best seats, the younger ones gathered around phones sharing Instagram stories, and everyone existing in their established roles like actors in a play they'd all memorized. Melissa had retreated to the kitchen again, this time under the pretense of starting the dishes. Really, she needed the physical activity to keep her hands busy while her mind raced in circles. Every few minutes, she'd check her phone, reading Victoria Knight's message over and over until she'd memorized every word. The Zenith Project. Extremely time-sensitive. A development that changes everything. Through the archway, she could hear Emma holding court again, this time describing her new office setup to cousin Janet's teenage daughter, who was filming everything for TikTok. The desk is this gorgeous reclaimed wood, and I have 2 monitors plus a laptop setup, Emma was saying. The whole tech integration was this massive project. We partnered with this startup that just transformed everything. I mean, I can't take credit for finding them. That was all Victoria, but implementing their systems has been my baby. Your baby. Melissa almost laughed, but the sound would have come out bitter. Those systems Emma was so proud of implementing. Melissa had spent 2 weeks walking Emma's team through the transition, disguised as technical support from the anonymous contractor. She'd been on video calls with Emma's department, watching her sister take notes on processes Melissa had designed, listening to Emma explain features to her team that Melissa had coded line by line. At the time, Melissa had found it almost amusing, the irony of secretly helping her sister succeed while remaining invisible. Now it felt like swallowing glass. Melissa, honey, can you start the coffee? Her mother called. Victoria should be here soon, and you know how important first impressions are. First impressions. If only her mother knew that Victoria Knight's first impression of Melissa had already been formed through months of professional correspondence. Messages that began with, "Your implementation exceeded all expectations, and the client is thrilled with the results." Messages that treated her like an expert, a problem solver, someone whose opinion mattered. Messages that had nothing to do with the woman washing dishes in discount sweaters. Melissa started the coffee maker, muscle memory guiding her through the familiar motions while her thoughts spun in increasingly frantic circles. What would happen when Victoria arrived? Would she recognize Melissa's name? Would she connect MC Digital Solutions to the quiet woman in the kitchen? And what would Emma do when she realized that her greatest professional triumph had come from her failure of a sister? The doorbell rang. Every conversation in the living room stopped, as if someone had pressed a pause button on the entire gathering. Melissa heard her mother's sharp intake of breath, the rustle of people straightening clothes and checking hair and phone cameras. "That must be Victoria," Emma said, her voice carrying a note of nervous excitement that Melissa hadn't heard since they were children waiting for Christmas morning. Footsteps crossed the living room. The front door opened. Her mother's voice, warm and welcoming. "You must be Victoria. Emma's told us so much about you. Please come in." "Thank you so much for including me," came the response, a voice that was crisp, confident, unmistakably accustomed to being heard. "I hope I'm not intruding on family time." "Not at all. We're so honored to have you." Melissa gripped the edge of the sink, knuckles white. Through the archway, she could see the elegant figure stepping into the living room, and her breath caught. Victoria Knight was nothing like she'd imagined. In person, she was smaller than expected, but with a presence that seemed to fill the entire room. Her hair was silver white, pulled back in a sleek chignon, and she wore a charcoal blazer that probably cost more than Melissa's monthly rent. But it was her eyes that stopped Melissa cold, sharp, intelligent, and currently scanning the room with the focused attention of someone who noticed everything. "Emma, congratulations again on the promotion," Victoria said, embracing Melissa's sister with genuine warmth. "You've earned every bit of it." Emma beamed, introducing Victoria to each family member with the kind of careful attention usually reserved for visiting dignitaries. Melissa watched from the kitchen, feeling like a spy in her own family's home. "And where's your other daughter?" Victoria asked, her question casual but somehow carrying weight. "Melissa, isn't it? I believe Emma mentioned her." Melissa's heart stopped. "Oh, she's just tidying up in the kitchen," their mother said with a wave of her hand. "You know how it is with these family gatherings. Someone has to keep things running smoothly." Someone has to keep things running smoothly. As if Melissa's entire existence could be summed up as behind-the-scenes maintenance, essential but unremarkable. "Actually," Victoria said, and something in her tone made the entire room go quiet. "I was hoping to meet her specifically." The silence stretched like a held breath. Melissa could see Emma's confusion, her parents' surprise, the way every face in the room turned toward the kitchen with varying degrees of bewilderment. "Melissa," their father called, his voice carrying that particular note of impatience that meant she was supposed to appear immediately and not ask questions. She dried her hands on the dish towel, her movements deliberate and slow. Every step toward the living room felt like walking toward the edge of a cliff, not knowing if she'd find solid ground or empty air on the other side. When she appeared in the archway, Victoria Knight's eyes locked onto hers immediately, and Victoria smiled. Not the polite, professional smile she'd given everyone else. This was something different, recognition, perhaps, or satisfaction at a puzzle piece finally clicking into place. "Melissa," Victoria said, stepping forward with her hand extended. "I've been looking forward to meeting you." Melissa stared at Victoria's outstretched hand, her mind completely blank. The living room felt like it was tilting, all the familiar furniture and faces suddenly foreign and strange. Everyone was watching, her parents, Emma, the cousins who'd barely acknowledged her existence all evening. And their expressions ranged from curious to confused to slightly annoyed that this important guest wanted to waste time talking to the family disappointment. "Hi." "Hello," Melissa managed, shaking Victoria's hand. The woman's grip was firm, confident, the handshake of someone accustomed to making decisions that mattered. "I hope you don't mind me asking," Victoria continued, her voice carrying easily through the silent room. "But are you the Melissa who runs MC Digital Solutions?" The question hung in the air like smoke. Melissa felt every pair of eyes in the room turn toward her, felt the weight of their attention in a way that was completely unfamiliar. She was used to being overlooked, dismissed, treated like background noise in her own life. This focused scrutiny felt like standing under a spotlight she'd never asked for. Yes," she said quietly. "That's me." Emma made a small sound. Surprise, maybe, or confusion. "Wait, what?" Victoria's smile widened. "Fantastic. I've been hoping to put a face to the name. Your work on the Morrison Project has been absolutely exceptional." "The Morrison Project." Melissa's hands started to shake. and she clasped them behind her back to hide it. Around the room, she could see family members exchanging glances, trying to make sense of what they were hearing. "I'm sorry," their father interrupted, his tone carrying that edge of disbelief that Melissa knew so well. "There must be some mistake. Melissa does computer work, but she's not running a company. She works from home." The dismissal in his voice was so casual, so automatic, that it hit like a physical blow. Not running a company, just computer work, just working from home, as if the location somehow diminished the value of everything she created. Victoria turned toward him, and something in her expression shifted. The warmth remained, but underneath it was steel. "I assure you there's no mistake," she said calmly. "MC Digital Solutions transformed our entire digital infrastructure. The systems integration alone saved us 6 months of development time and close to $500,000 in consulting fees." $500,000. The number dropped into the room's silence like a stone into still water, creating ripples of shock that Melissa could see spreading across every face. Emma was staring at her now, really looking at her for what felt like the first time in years. "Melissa, is this true? You built systems for Morrison and Associates." Melissa's throat felt like it was closing. She dreamed of this moment, of being seen, of having her work recognized, of proving to her family that she was more than their disappointment. But now that it was happening, she felt exposed and vulnerable, like a hermit crab pulled from its shell. The client was anonymous," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I didn't know it was your company." "Anonymous?" Emma's voice rose slightly. "You didn't know you were working on my project?" The accusation in her tone was subtle but unmistakable, as if Melissa had somehow deceived her, as if keeping a client's confidentiality was a personal betrayal rather than professional ethics. "Many of our tech partnerships involve NDAs and confidentiality agreements," Victoria interjected smoothly, but Melissa caught the sharp look she directed at Emma. "It's standard practice for sensitive projects." "But you said the founder was this mysterious startup genius," Emma continued, her confusion genuine but tinged with something that might have been hurt. "You never mentioned it was Melissa." "Because I didn't know it was Melissa," Victoria replied patiently. "MC Digital Solutions maintains strict privacy protocols. All of our communication was through project management systems and encrypted email. I only made the connection when I saw your family photos on your desk and recognized her from the employee headshots she'd submitted for security clearance." Employee headshots. Security clearance. The words fell into the silence like bombs, each one reshaping how everyone in the room was looking at her. Aunt Linda was the first to find her voice. "Security clearance? What kind of work are you doing, exactly?" Victoria answered before Melissa could even try. "Enterprise-level system architecture. Financial data integration. Cybersecurity protocols for Fortune 500 clients." She paused, letting the words sink in. "Melissa's work directly contributed to Morrison and Associates landing our 3 largest contracts this quarter." The room was so quiet that Melissa could hear the coffee maker finishing its cycle in the kitchen, the familiar gurgle and hiss that usually comforted her but now seemed to mock the surreal nature of the moment. Her mother was staring at her like she'd never seen her before. "Melissa, honey, why didn't you tell us? Why didn't you tell us?" The question was so naive, so oblivious to years of dismissal and condescension, that Melissa almost laughed. When exactly should she have mentioned it? During dinner conversations where her work was referred to as that computer thing? During family gatherings where she was invisible until someone needed the dishes washed or the coffee made? "You never asked," Melissa said quietly, and the simple truth of it seemed to hit the room like a slap. Emma's face flushed. "That's not fair. Of course we care about your work. We didn't understand the scope of what you were doing." "Because you never tried to understand," Melissa replied, and she was surprised by the steadiness of her own voice. "For 8 years, you've acted like I was failing at life because I didn't follow the path you expected. Because I worked from home instead of an office. Because I wore comfortable clothes instead of designer suits. Because I chose privacy over publicity." "Melissa," her father started, but Victoria held up a hand. "If I may," Victoria said, her voice cutting through the family tension with professional authority, "I think there's been a significant misunderstanding here." Victoria reached into her briefcase, a sleek leather piece that looked like it cost more than Melissa's computer, and pulled out a tablet. She tapped the screen a few times, then turned it to face the room. "This is MC Digital Solutions profile in our vendor database," she said, her voice taking on the crisp tone of a boardroom presentation. "Annual revenue, $2.3 million. Client retention rate, 98%. Average project completion time, 40% faster than industry standard." The numbers hit the room like a series of explosions. Melissa watched her family's faces transform, confusion giving way to shock, dismissal melting into disbelief. "2.3 million, her mother whispered. "That's just last year." Victoria continued, scrolling through the tablet. "This year's projections are significantly higher, especially after the Morrison partnership opens doors to other enterprise clients." Emma was shaking her head slowly, like she was trying to solve a puzzle that kept changing shape. "But, Melissa, if you're making that kind of money, why are you living in that tiny apartment? Why do you drive that old car?" The question revealed so much about how Emma saw the world, as if success could only be measured in displays of wealth, as if the size of someone's apartment determined their worth. "Because I don't need a bigger apartment," Melissa said simply. "And my car runs fine." "But you could afford." "I could afford lots of things," Melissa interrupted, and for the first time in the conversation, her voice carried an edge. "I choose to live simply. I choose to save my money. I choose to focus on my work instead of impressing people who never bothered to understand what I was building." The accusation hung in the air, sharp and unmistakable. Melissa saw her parents exchange glances, saw Aunt Linda look down at her wine glass, saw Cousin Janet finally put away her phone. Victoria was watching the family dynamics with the focused attention of someone accustomed to reading rooms, and Melissa could see her forming conclusions about what she was witnessing. "If I may ask," Victoria said carefully, "how long has your family been unaware of your company's success?" The question was diplomatic, but the implication was clear. "How long have you been underestimating her?" "We knew she was doing well," Melissa's father said defensively. "We just didn't realize the scale." "The scale," Victoria repeated, and something in her tone suggested she found that explanation insufficient. "Melissa, your company is being discussed in tech journals. You've been featured in case studies about successful remote-first businesses. Your innovation in API integration has become an industry standard." Each fact was another blow to the family's assumptions, another crack in the foundation of how they'd categorized Melissa's life. She could see them struggling to reconcile the daughter and sister they thought they knew with this stranger who apparently commanded respect in rooms they'd never imagined her entering. "Industry standard?" Emma asked faintly. "The Morrison integration alone will likely become a model for how other firms approach digital transformation," Victoria continued. "We're already getting inquiries from competitors asking how we achieved such seamless implementation." Melissa felt surreal, like she was watching someone else's life being described. For years, she'd worked in isolation, building systems and solving problems without recognition or acknowledgement. The idea that her work was being discussed in boardrooms and industry publications was almost impossible to process. "Actually," Victoria said, tapping her tablet again, "that brings me to why I wanted to meet you tonight, Melissa. We have a proposition." The room held its breath. Even the cousins had stopped their whispered conversations, drawn into whatever was about to happen. "Morrison and Associates would like to offer MC Digital Solutions an exclusive partnership agreement," Victoria continued. "Full integration of your company as our primary technology consultant, with guaranteed minimum contracts of $15 million annually." $15 million. The number was so large that it seemed to exist in a different universe from Melissa's daily reality. She thought about her modest apartment, her careful budgeting, her secondhand furniture and decade-old laptop that she'd been planning to replace when she could justify the expense. Around the room, she could see her family doing the mental math, their eyes widening as they began to understand what Victoria was offering. Additionally, Victoria went on, "We'd like to discuss acquisition possibilities. If you're interested in scaling beyond what you can manage as a solo operation, Morrison has the resources and client base to take MC Digital Solutions to the next level." Acquisition. The word hung in the air like a promise and a threat combined. "Of course, that would require relocating to our main office," Victoria added. "We'd need you on-site for the level of integration we're envisioning. Corner office, full team, whatever resources you need." "Corner office, full team." Melissa looked across the room at Emma, who had gone completely pale. The promotion Emma had been celebrating, the corner office she'd been so proud of, suddenly seemed smaller in comparison to what was being offered to her supposedly unsuccessful sister. I, I need to think about it, Melissa managed. Victoria nodded. Of course, it's a significant decision, but I hope you'll consider it seriously. Your talent is too valuable to remain hidden. Hidden. That was exactly what Melissa had been, not just from the industry, but from her own family. Hidden in plain sight, dismissed and overlooked while building something remarkable in the shadows of their expectations. The conversation continued around her, Victoria explaining the partnership details, her parents asking questions with voices that had completely changed from dismissive to deferential, Emma sitting in stunned silence. But Melissa felt like she was underwater again, sounds muffled and distant. Everything was changing. In the span of 30 minutes, her life had transformed from small and overlooked to significant and sought after. The family that had treated her like a failure was now looking at her like she was a stranger they needed to get to know. But underneath the validation and the shock and the overwhelming magnitude of what was being offered, one question kept surfacing in her mind. What did she actually want? The doorbell chimed through the house again, cutting through the transformed atmosphere like a knife through silk. This time, everyone turned toward the sound with curiosity rather than anticipation. All the expected guests had already arrived. Melissa's mother rose to answer it, her movements careful and deliberate, as if the revelations of the past hour had made her uncertain about her own home. "Are we expecting anyone else?" she asked, but the question was directed at no one in particular. Through the front window, Melissa caught a glimpse of a figure on the porch, someone in a dark coat, shoulders hunched against the evening chill. Something about the silhouette was familiar, but she couldn't place it. Her mother opened the door, and Melissa heard a sharp intake of breath. "David," her mother said, voice filled with confusion and something that might have been concern. "What are you doing here?" "David." Melissa's stomach dropped. She hadn't heard that name spoken in their house for 3 years, not since. "I'm sorry to interrupt," came a voice from the doorway, deeper than she remembered, rougher around the edges, but unmistakably him. "I know I'm not exactly welcome here, but I need to talk to Melissa." The living room went silent again, but this was a different kind of quiet, tense and uncomfortable, filled with old tensions that Melissa had hoped were buried forever. Because David wasn't just anyone. David was the man she'd almost married, the man who'd left her 2 weeks before their wedding, claiming he couldn't tie himself down to someone with no real ambition. The man who'd shattered her heart so completely that she'd spent the next 8 years building walls around herself that no one, not even her family, had been able to breach. And now he was standing in her parents' doorway, asking to talk to her, on the night when her entire life had just turned upside down. David stepped into the living room, and Melissa felt the air change. It was like someone had opened a window to the past, letting in cold air that carried memories she'd spent years trying to forget. He looked different, older, obviously, but also worn down in a way that had nothing to do with age. His dark hair was streaked with gray at the temples, and there were lines around his eyes that she didn't remember. The confident swagger that had first attracted her in college was gone, replaced by something that looked almost like defeat. "Melissa," he said, and his voice cracked slightly on her name. I heard about your company." Of course he had. In a city this size, success stories traveled fast, especially when they involved people everyone thought they knew, especially when they involved people everyone had written off. The living room had become a tableau of frozen shock. Victoria Knight stood near the mantelpiece with her tablet still in hand, looking like a corporate executive who'd accidentally wandered into a family soap opera. Emma was staring between Melissa and David with her mouth slightly open. Their parents wore expressions of barely contained panic, the look of people who'd just watched their carefully orchestrated evening spin completely out of control. "David," their father said, his voice carefully neutral, "this really isn't the best time." "I know," David replied, but he didn't look away from Melissa. "I know I have no right to be here. I know I gave up that right a long time ago. But I had to. I needed to tell you something." Melissa found her voice, though it came out smaller than she'd intended. "You needed to tell me something? Now, after 3 years of silence. I know how it looks. Do you?" The words came out sharper than she'd planned, 8 years of buried hurt suddenly surfacing. Do you really know how it looks? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you heard that the woman with no real ambition is suddenly worth talking to. The quote hung in the air like an accusation. Those had been his exact words. No real ambition. Spoken in their shared apartment 2 weeks before their wedding, when she tried to explain why she wanted to start her own business instead of taking the corporate job his father had arranged for her. David's face flushed. That's not. I never said that. You absolutely said that. Melissa's voice was getting stronger, fueled by years of suppressed anger. You said I had no real ambition. You said I was wasting my potential on computer games instead of building a real career. You said you couldn't marry someone who was content to be mediocre. Around the room, she could see her family members shifting uncomfortably. These were wounds they'd never seen exposed. Private pain that had been carefully hidden beneath years of polite distance and careful avoidance. I was wrong, David said quietly. I was so wrong, and I've regretted it every day since. Every day. Melissa laughed, but the sound was bitter. Every day for 3 years, you've regretted walking out on me? Then where have you been? Where were the phone calls? The messages? The attempts to make things right? I tried. No, you didn't. The certainty in her voice surprised even her. You decided I wasn't worth your time, so you moved on. You married Rebecca 6 months later, didn't you? Had the big church wedding, the society reception, the wife with the real career in finance. David's silence was answer enough. Victoria Knight cleared her throat delicately. Perhaps I should go, she said, but Melissa shook her head. No, please stay. I think it's important that everyone here understands something. She turned back to David, and for the first time in 3 years, she looked at him directly without flinching. You left me because you thought I was settling for less. You thought my dreams were too small, my ambitions too modest. You wanted someone who would fit into your world, who would make you look successful by association. Melissa, that's not. Let me finish. Her voice carried a authority that silenced him immediately. You left me because you couldn't see past your own narrow definition of success. Because you measured worth in corner offices and designer clothes and the right kind of social connections. Because you thought building something from nothing was less valuable than climbing someone else's ladder. She gestured around the room, taking in her stunned family. Victoria Knight with her tablet full of numbers, the evidence of everything she'd built while David was living his conventional life. I spent 8 years thinking you were right, she continued. I spent 8 years believing that maybe I really was mediocre, that maybe I really was settling for less. I let your voice become the voice in my head that told me to stay small, stay quiet, stay hidden. The words were pouring out now, years of internalized criticism finally being externalized and examined in the light. But here's what you never understood, Melissa said, her voice growing stronger with each word. I wasn't settling. I was building. While you were networking and schmoozing and playing political games to climb corporate hierarchies, I was learning, creating, solving problems that actually mattered. I was building something that belonged to me. She turned to address the entire room, her family and Victoria and David all witnessing something that felt like a reckoning. For 8 years, I've been invisible in this family because my success didn't look like what you expected success to look like. I worked from home, so it wasn't real work. I dressed comfortably, so I wasn't professional. I chose privacy over publicity, so I must not have been achieving anything worth publicizing. Her mother made a small sound of protest, but Melissa held up her hand. I'm not saying this to hurt anyone. I'm saying it because it's true, and because I'm done pretending it's not. She looked directly at David. And you? You showing up here tonight, after hearing about my company. It proves that you never knew who I really was. You fell in love with your idea of who I could become, not who I actually was. David's jaw worked silently for a moment. Rebecca and I, we're getting divorced, he said finally, as if this revelation would somehow change everything. I'm sorry to hear that, Melissa replied, and she was surprised to realize she meant it. But it has nothing to do with me. It has everything to do with you. The words burst out of him with desperate intensity. I realized. I've been thinking about what we had, about what I threw away. What you threw away was 8 years ago, Melissa interrupted. I'm not the same person you left. I'm not the woman who would have given up her dreams to fit into your world. I built something magnificent from the ashes of what you told me wasn't good enough. Victoria Knight stepped forward, her presence commanding immediate attention. If I may, she said. her voice carrying the kind of authority that came from years of managing difficult conversations. I think there's something everyone in this room needs to understand about what Melissa has accomplished. She turned her tablet toward the group again, but this time she scrolled to a different screen. This is a list of MC Digital Solutions clients over the past 5 years, Victoria continued. Patterson's Bakery. Melissa built their entire online presence from scratch, increasing their revenue by 400%. Rodriguez Food Truck. Her mobile app helped them expand to 6 locations. Mercy General Hospital. Her patient management system streamlined their entire operation and reduced wait times by 60%. Each name was a story, a relationship, a problem solved. Melissa had never thought of her client list as impressive. They were just people who'd needed help, businesses that had trusted her with their most critical systems. These aren't just contracts, Victoria said, her voice taking on an almost reverential tone. This is a portfolio of transformation. Melissa didn't just build software. She built solutions that changed lives, saved jobs, created opportunities. Emma was shaking her head slowly. The Rodriguez family. Didn't they send us that invitation to their daughter's quinceañera last year? Maria Rodriguez is my client, Melissa said quietly. Her family's they're like family to me. They invite me to everything. And Mrs. Patterson from the bakery, she always asks about you when I go in there, their mother said, understanding dawning in her voice. She calls you her angel. Because I helped her save her business during the pandemic, Melissa replied. She was going to close permanently, but we built an online ordering system in 3 days. She didn't just survive, she thrived. The room was silent as the implications sank in. While her family had been dismissing her work as insignificant, Melissa had been quietly building a network of relationships, solving problems, making differences in ways that mattered deeply to the people she served. David was staring at her like he'd never seen her before. I had no idea, he said softly. No, Melissa agreed. You didn't. And that was the problem. Victoria's tablet chimed with an incoming message. She glanced at it, then looked up with an expression of barely contained excitement. Melissa, she said, I just received word from our board of directors. They've approved the acquisition offer. The room went still again, but this time it was the stillness of people holding their breath before a major announcement. They're prepared to offer $25 million for full acquisition of MC Digital Solutions, with you as Chief Technology Officer of the merged entity. Your own division, your own team, complete autonomy over technical decisions. $25 million. The number was so large it didn't seem real. Melissa felt like she was floating outside her body, watching someone else's life unfold in real time. Additionally, Victoria continued, they've asked me to extend an invitation for you to present at the National Technology Innovation Conference next month. Your integration methodologies are exactly what the industry needs to hear about. National Conference. Speaking engagement. Chief Technology Officer. The words swirled around Melissa like a tornado of possibilities she'd never imagined. David was looking at her with something that might have been awe, or regret, or recognition of how completely he'd misjudged everything. Melissa, I don't know what to say. Then don't say anything, she replied gently. There's nothing left to say between us, David. You made your choice 8 years ago, and I've spent every day since proving that it was the right choice for both of us. She turned to Victoria, her mind finally beginning to catch up with the magnitude of what was being offered. Can I have some time to think about the acquisition? She asked. It's overwhelming. Of course, Victoria said. Though I should mention, the conference presentation would be separate from the acquisition. That's an opportunity I'd encourage you to take regardless of what you decide about joining Morrison permanently. The industry needs to hear your voice. Your voice. For 8 years, Melissa had worked in silence, communicating through code and systems and solutions that spoke for themselves. The idea of actually speaking, of sharing her knowledge directly with other professionals, was both terrifying and thrilling. I'll think about it, she said. Victoria nodded and began packing up her tablet. I should go and let you process all of this. It's been an illuminating evening. As she moved toward the door, she paused beside Melissa. For what it's worth, Victoria said quietly, I've been in this industry for 25 years, and I've never seen work that impressed me more than yours. You have a gift, Melissa. Don't let anyone convince you to hide it. After Victoria left, the living room felt cavernous and strange. The celebration decorations were still up, the congratulations balloons, the remnants of the cake, the wine glasses scattered on coffee tables. But everything felt different now, like set pieces from a play that had suddenly switched genres. David lingered by the door, clearly reluctant to leave, but equally clearly no longer welcome. "Melissa," he said one final time, "I just want you to know, I'm proud of you. I'm sorry it took me so long to understand what you were building." She looked at him for a long moment. This man who had once been the center of her universe, who had shaped so much of how she'd seen herself for so many years. "Thank you," she said simply. "Goodbye, David." After he left, the silence in the living room was profound. Emma was still sitting on the couch, staring at her hands. Their parents stood by the mantelpiece, looking like they were trying to solve a puzzle with too many missing pieces. Finally, Emma spoke. "All this time," she said softly, "I thought I was the successful one." It wasn't an accusation or a complaint, just a statement of fact that hung in the air between them. "You are successful," Melissa replied. "We're both successful. We just took different paths. But I've been so condescending." Emma continued, her voice getting smaller. "I treated you like you were falling behind, when really you were miles ahead of all of us." Melissa sat down beside her sister, close enough to touch, but not quite touching yet. "I let you," she said. "I let everyone treat me like I was failing because it was easier than explaining what I was really doing. It was easier than risking disappointment if you didn't understand or didn't think it was impressive enough." "But why?" their mother asked, moving closer to the couch. "Why didn't you tell us? Why did you let us think?" "Because you never asked," Melissa said again, but this time the words came out sadder than angry. "For 8 years, whenever I tried to talk about my work, it got dismissed as that computer thing or changed the subject to something more relatable. After a while, I stopped trying. The truth of it settled over the room like dust, uncomfortable and inescapable. We failed you," their father said quietly. "We were so focused on what we thought success should look like that we never bothered to see what you were actually accomplishing." It was the closest thing to an apology Melissa had ever heard from him, and it hit her harder than she'd expected. "I don't need apologies," she said. I need us to see each other clearly from now on. All of us." Emma finally looked up at her, tears in her eyes. "Can we start over? Can we? Can you teach me about what you do? Really teach me, not just the surface stuff." Melissa smiled, and for the first time all evening, it felt completely genuine. "I'd like that," she said. "If you made it to the end, please like the video and subscribe to our channel. It truly means the world to us. See you in the next one."